Yeah, I guess I have a hard time wrapping my brain around it. Only because down to how much money that we have to be able to, you know, facilitate them, during their older age. And I don't know. To me, it all kind of links back to what does that buy us in the middle age to put parents into some place. It always comes back to kind of like, do we want more? We want more time for ourselves. This is kind of to me this selfish mentality or notion of, I've got my kids to deal with. I can't deal with you. You have dementia. You have Alzheimer's. You know what I mean? Like it's too much in that sense. And I don't know. It's this whole modernization of, I don't know, like you said, values and lack thereof. I mean, in my opinion.
Well, it reminds me of that scene from I think it was called Fallen. It was a Michael Douglas movie from back in the '90s where it's kind of a cathartic film. I believe it was Fallen, where he is like going to work as an engineer, but he lost his job and he just freaks out. He like leaves his car on the side of the LA highway and starts walking and kind of punishing people in society. And I just remember there was one guy that was protesting, and he said, I was fired because I was no longer economically viable. And they kept using that word in kind of a chant as the police dragged him off. An African American character in the thing, and it just leads me to believe that elderly people are no longer economically viable. And in a capitalist society, they don't have a role because
Yeah.
wisdom or, I mean, listen,
Yeah.
it's an
No.
easy fit, right?
That.
You got kids and you have elderly people. You got an instant babysitter if they live home, and then you guys, go out and work and provide for both of them. I mean, it's an easy fit that works organically nearly everywhere in the world, except here and Western Europe and Australia, and a
It's
couple other
it,
rich nations.
it's funny that you say that because there's a story. My brother-in-law spends some time. I don't know if he still does, but he used to spend um, Christmases at the with the Navajo in Arizona, and
Oh, you man, that's amazing.
yeah,
Uh,
and or no, maybe I mean actually, you know what? It's the Apache. I'm sorry, I don't know if they're he spent time with the Apache there because their school mascot is the Apache, and because of him working with the school, he's got to do some service with the Apache and kind of have this connection between them. But regardless, he spends time with them, and he came back and he told me this story one time. Kind of going off of your economic viability type of theme there. He said that I don't know if they still do it to this day, but when you become elderly in that community, they know when they can no longer contribute to their community. And they're big on ceremony and they're big on tradition, and they throw this large party for them. And it's kind of like it's time for you to go. Kind of Survivor Island, you've been kicked off the island, but it's of their determination. And it's kind of that walk off into the woods and you're going to die,
with
and
dignity.
yeah, and I mean, you get to say your goodbyes. You get to say, you know what I mean. Kind of have your living, um, what do you call it? Memorial in a sense, and then you can no longer contribute, whether you're sick, whether you're, But it is something directly related to the community at hand. Whether our society is capitalistic and it's no longer economically viable, maybe that's our version of kicking people, you know, off the island. Here you go to the nursing home. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's. I mean, it's like nature's euthanasia,
Right.
euthanasia in a way. I mean, but
Well,
you think about all the wandering. I mean, I think that's probably just happened because when you have people that I don't know if the Apache were settled or the whole Trail of Tears thing or whatever, but if you have like a wanderer society, the horticulturalists, the kind of pre-city, the kind of wanderer, hunter-gatherer kind of period, if an old person couldn't walk anymore, like I think you get left. I don't think you get carried.
no.
Uh, I don't think
Yeah.
there's like a large kind of
No.
animal drawn carriage of all the elderly people. That happens. I think you just get left.
Well, yeah. I mean, Yeah, I was doing some
Ultimately,
research on that. There's plenty of instances and cultures. I mean, the Inuit of the Eskimos, they put you out on an ice block, take your clothes and you're done. Like that's it. Like, I was reading some ancient Japanese traditions that I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm not going to murder the word, but it's basically taking them out to the mountain, and that's it. That's where you are. You're on the mountain. I mean, these are century old, kind of traditions, but like you said, I mean, we can't, there's no cart carrying these people along, I mean, it's not, you don't want to get down to the Darwinism of it, you don't want to get it down to like survival, but at some level it might come down to it, or at least it was.
I think going back to the Inuit, I think it was the Laplanders, or it was like the Falkland Islands, or it's some of the islands that were like kind of around Iceland. But they were like otter hunters of some variety. I was just watching this the other day, and there's something about when food got scarce, they took they ate the grandmas first because they were the least able to hunt, and it's like island culture. There's a bit of a feast and famine kind of. All over the South Pacific, it's feast and famine. Or feast or fast, and apparently in this island nation up by Iceland, up by Greenland, they eat the grandmas when it's time to. They're the first to go. Which is so we're covering some pretty amazing things. Like you brought up Japan, which just blows me away because I always think of them as kind of the most reverent of
Yeah,
the Asian countries in
totally.
terms of
Exactly. Yeah.
elders. And then they kind of have that whole history of suicide that it's honorable to take your life if you've dishonored the family.
Right. Shame, shame
They
is
have a
shame
whole
is worse than death.
right, exactly. And then yet at the same time, they if you dishonored your family, you dishonored your elders, then you're better taking the sword out and starting again, I guess, in another manifestation. But then at the same time, you're telling me they leave their grandparents in the woods. Maybe
Yeah,
it's the kind.
it's called like
I don't know.
it's called like ubasute. I'm probably saying it wrong, but it all comes under the version of which I've never heard this term before called senicide, which is the killing of the elderly or abandonment to death of some sort. And a lot of cultures, kind of have practiced this, over time. Who's to say, whether they're right or wrong? I mean, it's their, their traditional beliefs for whatever the case may be. But again, kind of bringing that back to our culture, um, I don't know. In a way, we kind of do, do the same, but it's a much more, um, with a movie filter version of it. Like, I mean, we don't like to think about it like that, but if I start to think about, you know, I was going to have this question for you, but if I start to think about it for myself, of like, what would be some of your biggest fears of, becoming old, and that to me ranks up there for one of them, which is, no one there to take care of you. Um,
Sure.
and in our society, that kind of just kind of fits right in with the picture of, just being left in some bed somewhere that's not your home, that's not, something familiar to you, and you're just kind of left there for dead, for better sake, whether you're on a mountain or in a nursing home, you're one and the same, you're lonely, basically, and you have, um, and that kind of gets into a whole other gamut of having kids, and if you have kids, whose responsibility is it to take care of mom and dad when they get old, it's a
Or
whole
leave you.
laundry. Yeah.
um, it's interesting, man. I think that's a totally, it's almost a scary question. I mean, to be asked in a lot of ways, because we always kind of assume, um, it's kind of somebody else's problem, but we were meant to visit and share love, and it's interesting because I mean, think about the geographic nature of things. People used to never leave their village, and now I scarcely know anyone that really lives where they grew up in a lot of ways. That's almost rarer. I mean, not to say everywhere, but in a lot of places. And I get the general sense that, um, in terms of my own welfare, it's kind of like I always thought, maybe book a ticket to like this, Serengeti. And I was reading this book on neuroscience, something about It was like it was about body maps. The author was Blakesley, and they were talking about how one of the best ways to die is to be essentially killed by predators, because when when you get through the fight, I mean, you figure predators would pick off the oldest. You know, they only. I mean, even of a
They go after
predator hunting
they go after the sickly, the weak. You know, they know who they're going after.
the elder. You know, the old ones,
Yeah,
right? Or the young,
or the
excuse me.
young, right?
Right, right. And that's the kind of natural circle of things. I'm sure in Sudan and many places. I'm not exactly. I don't necessarily remember exactly where the parameters of the Serengeti are. I think with desertification, that's getting smaller shortly. But anyway, the point being is that in neuroscience, they found that these neuroscientists found that when you're finally pinned down by the lions, and you have no more fighting in you, I think they found it by testing the brains or blood levels of antelope, but apparently the brain is flooded with endorphins. So initially, when you're fighting for your life, it's painful. You know, that part really sucks. But apparently, once you like give up and you just surrender to the process, then it's ecstasy. I mean, it is just an ecstatic
Dude,
experience.
I'd rather much die in my sleep than die on the Serengeti underneath.
Well, I'm saying, I mean, at least it's better than just sitting there and waiting for it to happen. You know, I don't know. I mean, I guess you know, the idea is like dignity. I just feel like if I was killed by a tiger, you know, my great and like it was like, you know, I had a GoPro on my head or something. It was one of those things that could, you know, my great grandchildren would be like, my great grandfather was eaten by tigers. You know, that's
Sure.
one of the at
I
least
mean,
you know, instead of like. I don't know, maybe like doing a bunch of heroin and driving a Ferrari off a cliff. Maybe that would be also a pretty legit memory to pass down, you know, for a couple generations. But you know, I think you know, we our view of death, I think in the West, specifically America, is like, you know, the medical system is like hold on for every, you know, even if you have no consciousness,
oh
keep
yeah.
it going. You know,
Well, it's all
death
about
is
that insurance dollar. You know what I mean? If we can milk what you have left, you know, we're gonna do it.
milk it. Let's milk it. You
Yeah.
know, you're just a heartbeat and you know, a digestive system or whatever. But you know that we're holding on for it. I don't know. I think dignity is a beautiful thing, and my challenge is I was looking up longevity and countries with the most longevity, and I you know, it all looks really good on paper to know that if you move to Okinawa tomorrow and you keep the low sugar diet and you just survive primarily off of fish and seaweed, then you could live ostensibly to 129, and that sounds awesome. And there was a French woman lived to 122, and she smoked cigarettes every day and drank wine until she was 120, and only stopped smoking because she was afraid she was going to light her house on fire. I'm not really sure if longevity is the goal, only because the brain goes before the body
Well,
does, you know,
sure.
and that's the part
I mean, we're
where
talking quality of life, right? I mean, you know, eh, go ahead.
if you're a person trying to serve your great grandkids tea and tickle them and have them sit on your lap, well, you know, you're going to be kept around for a while longer. But I mean, if you're a nutter and you have no idea where you are and you're, you know, what I mean, the question is, are we our memories in a big way? And if you're starting fresh, I mean, my little brother. Works in a senior citizen center, a really luxurious one. He works in the Alzheimer's and Dementia Center, which I've been to, and I mean they're starting fresh every day. Like he works there, and they know his presence, they know his essence, but it's he's starting fresh every day with these folks,
Yeah, and
and
I mean, to me, like when I was gonna ask you again, ask you earlier, what you know, we all have innate fears. You know, some of them superficial, some of them imposed by society standards, some of them deep in our core. But I mean, you know, if you really get down to it, and you really have to face that question of getting old. I mean, you know, for me and my life and what I've done or accomplished or what I feel good about generally revolves around experience and memories. And the fact that